Okay, another YouTube video. Um, don't know what to say. Bank holiday weekend in excruciating pain. Really quite depressed. Um, Pain in the leg is excruciating, and all of the teeth that Dr. S.S. Tandy drilled out and left to rot into my gum line, and I've broken pieces of bone. It was excruciatingly painful. Um, 10 years on. The needle, the impingement, genitofemoral impingement in the hip, anterior thigh, groin, from where they've inserted the needle on the 13th of May of 2008 is now agony. It's been left for so long, it's seriously, seriously painful to the point that I can barely walk. It's excruciating. Um, I was going to mention something concerning Baconianism and Dixonianism and the Dixonian despotism of Gabby Dixon, hitched to the offending of John Bacon of the Royal Liberty of Havering Bower. I was going to start off with an excerpt from a book by Alistair McIntosh. Here he states, "It may be, then, that mainstream Western culture has fallen victim to voodoo economics, to an extent much more wide-ranging than has been acknowledged." And here he states, "We conclude that while the West has distorted and caricatured real contemporary voodoo, that post-slavery Caribbean synthesis of African animistic religions, it may have fallen victim to its own brand of voodoo, in consumerism's culmination of the Baconian project." So the Baconian project, say, of John Bacon, who abused me for 10 years as a child between 1986 and 1996 with the police, and the Dixons, and the corporate ethos, the corporate manifesto of Dixon's Group plc, so Gabby Dixon, hitched to the practices of John Bacon. In St Albans, when I lived in St Albans, Hertfordshire, the ancestral home of Viscount Francis Bacon is at Gorenberry House, St Albans, and 2 miles up the road in Hemel Hempstead is Dixon's Group plc's financial headquarters. So in terms of corporate absolutism hitched to monarchical absolutism, they both complement one another, so to speak. And this goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, in terms of voodoo and the Baconian project, and buying into it, as Alistair McIntosh states here, he says something along the lines of, "It may have fallen victim to its own brand of voodoo, in consumerism's culmination of the Baconian project." So consumerism's culmination of the Baconian project, buying into the Baconian project. And that comes courtesy of Dixon's Group plc, with Currys and DFS and Maplin's and PC World. Mammon and Moloch, the worshipping of Mammon, and the altercations at the altar of Moloch. Dixon and Bacon, Mammon and Moloch. Havering and Kettering. Now, in Havering, with their voodooism, it sounds far-fetched when looked at like that. But now, if I was to say, as a teenager, I had a vasectomy operation take place with me, whereby they surgically butchered me down under and got me into hospital with a small nick on the end of my never regions, and once in hospital, put a big incision through my scrotum, so they could inject chemicals into the vas deferens, rendering my testes sterile. Now, Baconian eugenics, the Baconian project, and the Baconian eugenics as a teenager in the Royal Liberty of Havering Bower, with the enforced sterilisation practices that were instituted by the Bacons and the Dixons. So what you get is this is the Baconian project, and when stated here, how the West has distorted and caricatured real contemporary voodoo, yet has fallen victim to its own brand of voodoo. Their voodoo involves the National Health Service torturing their victims, clinically butchering, sterilizing their victims, partaking in medical and scientific experimentation, endocrinological misappropriation in terms of endocrinological studies, in terms of bringing to an end the reproductive capacity of those that they target as teenagers. on grounds of ethnicity, on grounds of numerous reasons. In the culmination of the Baconian project between Havering, Attibawa, and Kettering, Northamptonshire, as a teenager, they were placing needles into my right wrist. They were placing needles into my genitalia, into my vas deferens. They're the cords that attach to the testes. And to access those cords, they need to incise the scrotum. So they had to partake. There was an act of what it could be deemed to be genitalia mutilation. What you've got here in Kettering is another pitch on their Nazism. So in Havering, say the gaffer would use the handheld stun gun. John Bacon with the handheld stun gun, it leaves no marks on the body. Here and having the victim used like a voodoo doll at Harold Wood Hospital with the needles in the genitalia, needles in the forearm. Here in Kettering, Northamptonshire, it's different. They misappropriate the use of the arthrogram procedure in order to embed the needle in the upper thigh groin triangle when they clinically disfigure the leg, and that's appropriated on the behalf of with influence, should I say, influenced by the Bacons and the Dixons with their Baconian project. John Bacon, Gary Dixon, Jonathan Hart of the Headlands, the suffering according to John, as it was with John Bacon, Harold Wood Hospital, the clinical director there, as it is here. Mammon and Moloch, Havering and Kettering, the Dixons and the Bacons, it's wonderful stuff. And all of the aliases that they appropriate the use of in terms of other surnames that they appropriate the use of. Where was I going with this? I have no idea. Lord Bacon, in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honour, assigns the first place to the condirators imperium, founders of states and commonwealths, and truly, to build up from the discordant elements of our nature, the passions, the interests and the opinions of the individual man, the rivalries of family, clan and tribe, the influences of climate and geographical position, the accidents of peace and war accumulated for ages, to build up from those oftentimes warring elements a well compacted, prosperous, and powerful state. If it were to be accomplished by one effort of in one generation, it would require a more than mortal skill. That's a letter written to Lord Bacon. So in terms of the Baconian project of John Bacon playing the part of Kingpin at Kingsbridge Circus in the Royal Liberty of Haven at Bower with his Royal Arch Freemasonry, pinning my ass to the bed with the stun gun, with my butchered ballsack that he'd had surgically butchered at Harold Wood Hospital in his hand as he tortured me with a stun gun. So this is what you get. You get accidents. The accidents of peace and war accumulated for the ages. So an accident occurred at Kettering General Hospital when they accidentally misappropriated the use of an arthrogram procedure to insert a needle via a needle insertion point into the top of my leg 10 years ago. An accident happened when a child supposedly slipped on a fence but really had his genitalia mutilated for the Baconian project of John Bacon in the Royal Liberty of Haven at Bower, who was colluding with the Dixons Group PLC. And this has gone on over 3 counties in 3 decades. In the Royal Liberty of Havering at Bower, Havering hitched to Kettering, and Hemel hitched to Harpenden and the St Albans connection in Hertfordshire. Where Viscount Francis Bacon's ancestral home is at Govenberry House, St Albans, and Dixon's Group plc have their financial headquarters at the Buncefield Industrial Estate, Maylands Industrial Estate, Dacorum, Hemel Hempstead, about 2 miles from the ancestral home of the Bacons. So I've become 6 years of it in St Albans, Hertfordshire, 10 years of it as a, or more, 10 years plus as a child, 86 to 96, with John Bacon and the Dixons. And then again here in Kettering, when I first arrived here, Gary Dixon lived in the flat downstairs. So therefore their Dixonian despotism, in terms of what's at the root of their domination system, there he was, well rooted in the block of flats preemptively housed here prior to my arrival, so we could be playing that masthead thing off with the RF field generator and everything else that's been explained in previous videos. I don't know where I'm going with this video. This is more of this is not, I don't know, I wasn't really planning to make a video or didn't, I don't know where I'm actually going with this, to be honest. I just wanted to show some comparatives between, say, Harold Wood, the Dixons and the Bacons, and the misappropriation of clinical oncology with the cancer scares and the misappropriation of the biopsies, or measures put in place to prevent pregnancies, or the Bacons in the Dixons. How can I put this? Like in Havering, in the Royal Liberty of Havering at Bower, with the Royal Institute of Obstetricians and Clinical Gynecologists misappropriating clinical gynecology, or misappropriating endocrinology in as much of oncology, because with the youngsters it's endocrinology, and that's how they bring the reproductive capacity of the teenagers that they target to an end, with the off the record vasectomy ops that they style out as accidents that have occurred once they get the child carted off to the hospital for the op. They do like to make Jaffas of their Jews, don't they? Because this is their Nazism. Remember, at the root of their sadism, with John Bacon playing the J.S. Sparks of Suffering according to John in German, with the torture sessions with a stun gun, whilst targeting the child with the National Health Service deployed to aid and abetting the offensive, butchering, torturing, afflicting, paediatric clinical social science misappropriated on the behalf of a ruling class paedophile who was involved in highbrow Nazism in the Royal Liberty of Havering at Bower, those involved in Royal Arch Freemasonry. No different than here in Kettering, Northamptonshire, with Gary Dixon with his Dixonian despotism hitched to the Baconian project of his gaffer. A gaffer is a derogatory term for an elderly person. A gaffer is also a chief electrician on a film set or in a theatre production, and a gaffer has working with him best boys and key grips, and that's what he was. He was one of the best boys, and then 20 years down the line, he's Sir Beelzebub, the bald-headed one, with his belligerence here in the block of flats with the RF fuel generator, the pornography, everything that's been mentioned in aforementioned in previous videos. I just want to show a comparative in terms of Baconianism and voodooism. So, like here, Alistair McIntosh writes in his book how the West has caricatured real contemporary voodoo, but yet it has its own form of voodooism. And this is how their voodoo works: ocular jabs in psychiatric institutes that leave their victims brain damaged, misappropriated arthrogram procedures so they can have needles embedded into their strategically, how can I put this, targeted and somewhat clinically incapacitated victims. Because if you embed a needle in someone's groin triangle upper thigh, as they have done with myself, it leaves the leg severely clinically disfigured. Their voodooism involves injecting chemicals into the vas deferens of the genitalia of young teenage boys that they've targeted in order to have them sterilised with off-the-record vasectomy ops in the Royal Liberty of Havering at Bower. The hospital at which these vasectomy ops and the misappropriation of clinical oncology was to take place throughout the 1970s, 80s and 90s is no longer there. They totaled the hospital. Harold Wood and Dolchurch, respectively, were both pulled to the ground, bulldozed about 2004, 2005. And that might be on account of the fact that too much clinical abuse and too much, impropriety had taken place within a clinical setting. I was probably not the only person in that locality to have undergone certain procedures at the hospital that I should have never have undergone. And it's very similar. This is their Havering Kettering Connect as they charter the exploits with the National Health Service, acting in a capacity whereby these so-called accidents can take place. What's happened with the arthrogram procedure at Kettering General Hospital with the embedding of a needle in the top of my leg is no accident. It's strategic. They've targeted me under a target machine at KGH Hospital's radiology department, have embedded an arthrogram needle or one of the local anaesthetic needles into the anterior hip genitofemoral aspect of the upper thigh. Whilst I'm being targeted under a target machine in radiology, Dixon, with his despotism and perversion, has had this target camcorder movie of what he believes to be my oldest daughter targeted, courtesy of his associates at Dixon's Group plc, Hemel Hempstead, which is about 5 stops down the train track from here, about 2 miles from Harpenden. So you've got Kettering, Wellingborough, Bedford, I believe, Luton, Harpenden. So that's where Dixon's Group PLC come into the equation. So whilst I'm being targeted at KGH as a 30-year-old athletic, healthy male, they were having a needle strategically embedded. This blue-eyed, grey-haired, 50-something Nazi anaesthetist who works with the Bacons and the Dixons has got me at the hospital with this arthrogram procedure, and she's left half a gram of mild still strategically skewed in my upper thigh groin triangle, and they've dropped me on the leg, clinically twisted, disfigured the leg, left the needle embedded. Whilst I'm being targeted under the target machine at radiology, that the one that has been a source of problems here at the root of the domination system in the block of flats, Gary Dixon, his associate from Dixon's Group PLC, 5 stops down the train track, and himself had what they believe to be my oldest daughter targeted on a camcorder with an adapted target lens. He's zooming in and out with the camcorder. You can see his reflection in the glass of the conservatory window as he's recording the video. He also had this other movie, like a BDSM gimp movie, fetish movie, and it's linked to the Kopfhorter, the German contraption used by Dr. Schreiber. I will mention some of that in another video concerning their Nazism involving the clinical social sciences, and just how, because at the moment, from this perspective, it doesn't sound, it's quite vague. But I can elaborate on the use of the Kopfhorter, the manual repression and dissociation with the chapter by Gary E. Schwartz, who he modelled himself on, similar to his gaffer who gave kids arse warts in the Royal Liberty of Havering Atty Bower at Kingsbridge Circus when he played the part of Kingpin, pinning young children to the bed that he had clinically butchered with the vasectomy ops at Haverwood Hospital. Here, Gary Dixon played the part of the Kingpin, whilst having my leg pinned in it, the Monarch of Mercia pitch with his palm on the microvolt dial of that RF field generator, the Monarch of Mercia pitch, the Schellenbergian sovereign elect, in-group sovereign elect pitch, in it, like some type of, how can I put this? Saxe Coburg Gotha, heading it off as though he was heading a Royal Peculiar with his peculiar BDSM pornography and the Target Your Daughter movie, whilst having me targeted at KGH under the target machine in radiology for the needle to be inserted into my upper thigh via the needle insertion point with the misappropriated arthrogram procedure. The BDSM pornography, where she's wriggling around on the floor, is symbolic of the Kopfhorter, and the linking together of Havering and Kettering. The weaving of the ropes is symbolic of the tying-in arrangements between the Dixons and the Bacons, with a Baconian project hitched to his Dixonian despotism and perversion as he institutes these exploits and abuses to take place, with clinical social sciences and police force aiding and abetting him. It's symbolic of the tying-in arrangements. It's symbolic of the chartering of the abuse between Havering Atty Bower and Kettering, Northamptonshire, in terms of strategic housing management policy and the instituting of the clinical abuse that is preemptively chartered. A charter party excursion. How can I put it? What else is it symbolic of? When she's wriggling around on the floor, it's symbolic of me being here, stuck with the leg clinically disfigured with a needle in it. Someone who walks with a limp is someone who is gimp-legged. That's another thing it's symbolic of. In terms of symbolic interactionism, it may be symbolic of numerous things. The suffering of the ones that they have tortured, the reaving, the wriggling, the struggling against the bonds of iniquity, being caught up in the bonds of iniquity, as he plays the part of puppet master, orchestrator. It's similar to his gaffer's child rape exploits, with the J.S. Sparks of suffering, according to John, played in German in the background to set a religious narrative to the crucifying of children that they had tortured, sodomized, and surgically butchered for their psychosocial sadism to be instituted, for their pathological narcissism linked to, how can I put this, their monarchical megalomania, because they really do believe themselves to be just that, don't they? What with the offending of the Royal Liberty of Havering Atty Bower, hitched over to Kettering, Northamptonshire, as they pitch it off as though they're heading a Royal Peculiar with one another. The two primates, Bacon and Dixon, John Bacon, Gary Dixon, privy to the ways of instituting all types of perversion and getting away with it, whilst the National Health Service and police force arrange, facilitate, commission and aid in abetting the offending, which makes it all the more bizarre. I don't know where I was going with this. This is just a reminder video. It's about 20 minutes long, so I'm going to post this up on YouTube now and have a quick listen back.